Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lawfully Told, the podcast where we explore the personal and professional journeys of individuals in the legal world. I'm your host, Shirani Ranganatha, and in each episode, we sit down with professionals who share their experiences, challenges, and insights from their path in law. Today's guest has a built-in career that spans legal practice, teaching, entrepreneurship, and public service, offering a unique experience on how the law intersects with many different fields. Let's welcome Jim Chester. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation and learn more about the experiences that shaped your journey.
Well, thank you, Sharanya. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Every legal journey begins somewhere, often with a moment or experience that sparks curiosity about the field. Understanding where that interest begins can reveal a lot about what drives someone's career. So let's start from the beginning. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career in law?
It's much like everything a lawyer does. It's complicated, right? I don't remember exactly like there being a moment of my life going, "That's what I want to do. This is my path." It was something like a lot of us are introduced to when we're children watching movies or TV shows. You see, litigators in movies, and they're always very dramatic and they commanding presence, and they're very smart, and they're either evil or heroes. They're because they and that's the thing is they have a lot of power, and so you respond to that even as a kid. But and so I did see that, and I thought, okay, that's kind of neat. I like that people, all go and listen to that guy. He knows what he's doing. But I don't know if there was a specific moment early on, but there were little moments that I can look back to and say that influenced me somewhat. I do know that I found something when I was graduating high school. My mom found an old project I did in middle school, like seventh grade, where I'd written down what I'm going to be in the future. And apparently I was going to be a lawyer in seventh grade. So I knew it at least then, which is really funny because unlike a lot of folks who are interested in law, I didn't really have a lot of direct exposure to day-to-day law. I mean, I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I turned out to have like a second cousin who was an attorney, but he lived far away, so I didn't really, that's not like it was in the blood. But I really, just was sort of drawn to the fact that, that these guys could use their skill and their knowledge to defend people or protect people who wouldn't otherwise have protection. And I think maybe there's a little bit of that in me, the sort of knight. You want to be the white knight that saves the damsel or saves the day or the hero or everything. Maybe there was a little bit in there, and I saw that. Of course, lawyers are often portrayed as villains too. So this depends on what you're doing with your skill, and that's really the difference between a hero and a villain. It's not power because you look at superhero movies. And the heroes have powers, and the villains, they're super villains. They have powers too. And the difference is, what are you doing with your power? Are you using it to advance your own interests or your own ideology, or are you doing it to help people and protect people? And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody who would do something like that, even though I really wasn't 100% sure what it meant. I just knew, hey, that's a pretty good career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I relate to this especially because I come from a family of software engineers and mechanical and like business analysts. So essentially, I was always curious about the law, and it's great to see that um finding your career path isn't just one moment. It's a accumulation of experiences, thoughts, and memories, which is really good to hear as someone who's a beginner and wanting to find their career path. So, looking back at your undergraduate experience, you studied economic and political science at Texas A&M of Commerce. How did your time there shape your decision to apply to law school?
Yeah, it was one of the great things about law school, which you probably already know and have discussed on your other podcasts, is that unlike med school, where you have to take so many science classes or whatever, or accounting, you have to take so many accounting classes to be a CPA. To go to law school, you just have to have a college degree, so you can major in anything. And so, although when I went to college, I had, and it's still in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, lawyer. That's I'm no, but as somebody, and in my family, I was the first one to complete college. So there, I didn't have a bunch of college educated people around me. So the idea of graduating high school and then going to college for 4 more years, then trying to get a job was already a little out of reach, but then think, okay, well, I'm going to go spend 3 more years after that. It seemed like a, kind of absurd, but I never really questioned it, that I was just going to do it. And so I think there's something healthy in, when I refer to this in when I talk to entrepreneurs, when I mentor those guys, and in my own life, is that to be an entrepreneur you have to have a delusional level of confidence. And I think I had somewhere between stupidity and a delusional level of confidence to go into that. But as I was going through my journey in college, like a lot of people, you get exposed to through taking classes and things like that, a lot of different potential majors, potential career paths. And my first year or two, you're taking your basics and you're just kind of wandering through there, and you get exposed to this. And so, in my mind, I sort of bopped around for different majors conceptually, although I didn't officially declare or change them. I was just like, maybe I'll pursue that. Maybe I'll pursue that. But then I was it was oddly enough, it wasn't even at when I went to school, that it was called East Texas State. Now it's back to East Texas A&M. But you're right, it was A&M Commerce for, I don't know, 20 years or so, or 30 years. Um, so when I took a summer class at Paris Junior College, just down the road from ET, and it was economics. It was the first micro or macroeconomics class, and I really responded to the professor. He just had this sort of laid back attitude for economics. Seemed kind of, they didn't go together. And so it really was like, okay, this was more accessible, and just a really interesting guy. And the subject matter just drove me in. It was this idea that that this economics is the study of scarcity. Like, how do you best allocate scarce resources? And there are different schools of thought. There's a lot of math in there, which I generally kind of try to avoid as much as I could. But not like your family with the engineering degrees. I was like, let's get less math. I was okay at math. I just didn't seek it out. And so the economics was the first. Like, I really like this. So I originally declared economics major, and then as I was going through the degree plan. I also have always liked political thought, political analysis. I guess you would call it political science or political economy, and so I had taken in a few classes, and I said, well, I can do a minor in political science, but then I realized wasn't that much harder to do a double major. So I said, okay, great. So I really enjoyed that. And one of the coolest things about my experience at then what was known as ET was the economics department, which was seated inside the business school, was a relatively conservative group of professors for the most part. They're very conservative. They didn't push ideologies on us, but you could just kind of tell they were more matter of fact, led by rationale and capitalistic in their leanings and so forth. Still scholarly and everything. But then I would take classes, in the day, and I would go take my economics classes, very conservative influence. And then of course you go over to the political science department, and in like a lot of places, that's going to be a little more liberal leaning, a little more left leaning. And there were definitely some professors, even at ET, that were generally a little more progressive. And so it was an interesting dichotomy of different approaches in both of those, because there is a lot of overlap between economics and political science. Matter of fact, if I could have designed a single major, it probably would be called political economy, where you really do merge those together, because you can't separate, the way government influences the economy and the way people influence government, and the way money influences government, and so and resources and stuff. So that's really what led to me choosing that major. But the fact that I was able to take any major was great. But I do think that looking back, it did help me in a number of ways. Obviously not only a public service, but just understanding the legal system. The politics, kind of why it works the way it does. Beyond like your basic government class, right? So getting more deep into the theory of why governments operate the way they do helps with the legal system, because it's not an accident that literally half or more of our politicians are lawyers, right? So understanding the law, how it works, helps you influence it, and vice versa. And then the same thing with economics. The economics helped me not only understand from a public service and just the way the world works sort of thing, but especially like the micro thing led more into my entrepreneurship and my running my own businesses, which I knew if I was going to have a law practice at some point, I wanted my own. I wanted to be a partner. I wanted to run the firm. And so having some kind of a business background, I thought was going to be helpful. And that was definitely true.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So first of all, I want to congratulate you on being the first person in your family to get a degree. I know that feat is something that's amazing to hear. And another thing is that I despise math with all my being. So that's another thing why I was inclined to law and why many people are also inclined to the law because they despise math. And additionally, how you're talking about how majors interconnect and stuff like that. It's great that you had that sort of um law background before you went into law school because I've heard people taking like Italian as their undergrad and then going to law school and then all these things. So it's great that you had that background beforehand. And when you talk about conservative versus liberal or left-leaning professors, I appreciate that because perspective shapes our world and having perspective on different sides of a story of two subjects that are interconnected, as you say, is a great thing. And that's another way for listeners to realize how much importance perspective holds. So yeah, that's
Yeah, no,
great.
I go. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson that said, I may be chopping this quote up a little bit. Basically, you can tell a lot about how educated someone is by how difficult it is to offend them. And so I think one thing we can do, not just, our entire culture needs a little bit more critical thinking, but also a little bit more civil discourse, the ability to disagree without being disagreeable. And one way to do that is to expose yourself to different perspectives, different viewpoints. And a lot of people, I think, are scared to do that because they're afraid it's going to influence them. They're afraid they're going to lose their footing. And I get that. It's a real thing. But if you feel confident in the way you think through things, then you shouldn't be scared of ideas that threaten that, because you should, if anything, if those ideas that you have, that you hold, virtues or values you hold, they're going to be proven true. And if they're not, then maybe they weren't that great, So, but you can't just roll over for anything. So you need to understand what you believe, but it's great to take in these other beliefs. And so having exposure to things and challenging yourself, whether it's politically or to take math classes when you don't like math, or to take those difficult things and push yourself. We're There's so much influence and so much pressure on, especially young people now, but everybody feels it, to never fail, like to just do things that you're good at. And that's not the purpose of life. That's not the purpose, certainly, of education. It's not just, it's so focused. I know you can't take this out of it. Education is so expensive. It's about getting jobs and things like that. But the purpose of a college education is to help you learn to think for yourself. It's not supposed to be indoctrinated. It's not telling you how to think or what to think about things. But chances are you've been taught that one way or another all the way your life, whether it's your parents, your religion, your schools. And then at some point you need to start thinking for yourself, but nobody's really taught you how to do that. And the best kind of classes, even if they don't say this is a class on how to think, the best classes, and that's what I liked about economics, it requires you to think analytically. Political science requires you to think analytically. So whether you're going into engineering or you're going into law, if you can take classes that require you to develop critical thinking skills, whatever that is, whether it's mathematics or logic and philosophy classes, whatever that is, will serve you very well the rest of your life. Because the challenge is, people think, oh, I'm going to go take classes and I'm going to major in this, and you're studying for a job or a career that may not exist 10 years from now. Look at what AI is doing to a lot of things. But if you can think, you will be able to solve the problems that come in the future. We don't know what those problems are yet, but I'm not afraid of them because I've been solving problems my whole life that I'd never solved before. Now, it doesn't mean I always solve them correctly the first time, but the learning how to think and taking a degree plan that is going to challenge you will help you in a number of ways. It's even if you want to go to law school, and I know there's a sensitivity to, yeah, but I want to get good grades because that's what it takes to get into law school. I understand that. But at the same time, if you challenge yourself, you will do better in law school, whichever law school you get into, because you've been used to challenging yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just another way of how these law classes like relate to every single profession. And what you said about professors saying that they're easily not offended or that quote, it resonated with me completely because relating it to the high school aspect when we're debating or we're having Socratic seminars in the classroom, the more you're offended proves the more you haven't read the packet or read the reading. And so I absolutely relate to this. And I think that's such an insightful quote or thought that could really inspire and kind of change the mindset of many people in the younger generation who's very split. Like, I can't. Like our community is very split right now, and it hurts to see. So seeing that just to make your information and your perspective more well-rounded benefits all of us in the end. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving on, reflecting on your time and your life, were you always wanting to pursue the law, or did you consider other paths as well?
I kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier. When I got to college, I had the exposure thing. I thought because once I got into economics, that maybe I'll pursue something in economics, whether it's in public policy, or working for the Federal Reserve or something along those lines, or maybe in finance and banking and stuff. But through that process, I realized as much as I enjoyed economics, I didn't necessarily want a career in it. I didn't want a career in political science, although the same thing. Do I start my own? We didn't have blogs back then, but a think tank or write white papers and go join an institute, get a PhD, maybe teach, write books. That was definitely something of interest to me, and I kept coming back to this idea that no, there's more, and I really think that I want to pursue law, and again, graduating from college was kind of a big feat for my family, but also going to law school and just kind of taking a leap and going down to school in Houston, and moving to the city from a small town, and had lived in Sulphur Springs where I grew up, and then I lived in Commerce for college, and then here I am in Houston in a high rise in downtown, and so that was just like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, just plucked me and dropped me right in the middle of this high rise, and so it was an adventure. It was, not certainly not as intimidating as it could be outside my comfort zone. I was never, it wasn't scary like when people go all over the world and, as missionaries or whatever. That's adventure. For me, the adventure was going to Houston and living in a high rise, but it was still different and it was still new and it was still scary. But it was fun. And I got in there and I guess more than anything else learned more about what law really is. And I found that inside of law, there were things that if I had to do for the rest of my life, I wouldn't like it and I wouldn't be happy as a lawyer. But also inside of law, there were other things that maybe I did enjoy. And if I could do these things for the rest of my life, then maybe I would be happy as a lawyer. So this idea of going to law school and being a lawyer, sort of I was drawn in by, images I saw. Maybe it's, in the small town I grew up in, we all knew who the lawyers were, and they were leaders in community, leaders in the church, and I'm thinking it all kind of goes together. And I wanted to be somebody like that, but they all had different legal practices. Some were litigators, and some were family lawyers, and so forth. So it wasn't a consistent thing. It was just that they were a lawyer. So I knew that I didn't have to pick the path of law. So it's kind of like saying I'm going to be a teacher or I'm going to be an engineer. Well, there's lots of different ways to be an engineer. There's lots of different ways to be a doctor, lots of different ways to be a teacher. And if you choose the wrong one within it, you may be unhappy, but that doesn't mean that teaching is bad or engineering is bad. As maybe you should have been a computer science major instead of an electrical engineer, or maybe you should have been an orthodontist instead of a dentist. So that within that general path, I figured I had some wiggle room. So I thought it was a worthy chance to take.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your first point, change is always hard. Like coming from a small town, moving, change is always hard. And so I know a lot of people, it's college app season, applications are coming out. They might be intimidated by this change. So it's great to see living professionals who have been in their shoes and have also moved across the state or even across the country to pursue their education. And going back to how you thought of entrepreneurship and you had the economic and political side of knowledge in your degree and stuff like that. So it's great to see that you had a wide array of jobs or opportunities that you could pick from through your degree, which is insightful to hear. So going back to the thought of law school is often where future lawyers begin to truly understand the profession. Let's talk about your experiences during law school and your early years of your career. So, starting with your time in law school, you earned your JD from South Texas. What was your experience in law school like, and what surprised you the most about it?
Well, I went in to law school thinking I knew what a lawyer was, and I was going to be one of those, which was basically a litigator, a trial attorney, the guys you see on TV, the guys you see in movies. the ones that get interviewed on after big cases and everything. Not just because I wanted to be famous, because I really, maybe I did, maybe I don't know, but I wanted to be in that role. I wanted to have that important, decisive role. And then coming out of law school, I'm a transactional attorney, and like something happened in the middle of this, and that was probably the biggest thing. Was going into law school. I've been told, like a lot of people my whole life, hey, you make a great lawyer. And now looking back, I think most of them were just calling me kind of an a-hole. Uh, so it was a nice way of them saying I was kind of difficult to deal with, argumentative, combative. Okay, I get that. Fair enough, right? But I should at least get paid for it, right? Not do it for free. So I thought that, okay, I'm good at this. And so I go to law school and I get into I take the classes, which the first year or so of law school is pretty much pre-assigned to you. You get assigned to the class because you have to take these basic classes, contracts and torts and property law and so forth. And then you start taking some electives on through there. And in college, I had written my honors thesis on um, NAFTA, international trade. I was always interested in business, obviously economics, political science, and how they come together. International trade agreements is a perfect example where you got governments and business kind of, coming together to do this. And so I always had that. I want to do business. So I thought, okay, I'll do commercial litigation. I get to work with businesses and I can do important things, but I didn't want to do law that related to people because there's too much at stake. I'm like, okay, if a business person loses a little bit of money, okay, bad. I'm sorry, you lost a little bit of money, you lost your case. But if a family lawyer loses their case, and you're like, oh no, my client just lost their children, they can't ever see their kids, or a criminal defense attorney, oh now my client's going to jail for 30 years because I didn't do a great job. And you're also, especially those areas of law, you're meeting people at sometimes the very worst moment of their life. So it takes a special kind of person to be able to do that and to be able to just be happy themselves the rest of the day when they carry that around. I thought business was more, rational, didn't have to be as emotional, and I wanted to be that. So go there to be a business litigator. And matter of fact, I was on that path. First year, top 20%. Did the law journal thing and started getting interviews and got some summer associate gigs with some litigation groups. And that was the most important thing I ever did, was work for people in litigation, because I got to see what real life litigation was like. And so mock trial, which is very big. It's like the football team of your law school, right? The mock trial and moot court. So mock trial is trial stuff, moot court is appellate, but they don't go compete against other schools. And it's just like, playing in college football, right? Well, and how good a school is at that. And that's why I chose South Texas. It was every year in the U.S. News was in the top 10 of litigation and advocacy. I'm like, okay, well, I want to stay in Texas. This is the place for this, and this is the kind of lawyer I want to be. So I went there. And then I clerked and I did the mock trial thing, which was fun. That's the stuff you get to do. And, you get to do the cross-examination, opening and close. And I guess those people my whole life were right, because I didn't even try out for the team. I was drafted through something I did in a class. We had a class where we had to do kind of a mini mock trial, and then you're supposed to do tryouts in the summer. And the judge, the volunteer judge for my class, said, "You're on varsity mock trial." I mean, I didn't try out or anything. He said, we need you on this team." I'm like, okay. And because I guess he liked the way I did my cross-examination or something to the witness. Anyway, so I'm on that path and I'm doing the interviews, and then I do a summer associateship with this attorney who had a small boutique, and had been doing it for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And a couple of things came out then that actual practice. I realized the stuff I liked most, which was in the courtroom, in front of a witness, the cross-examination, or even the closing argument, the stuff you get to see in the movies, the dramatic part, was very rare. It's very small amount of the time you do. And I remember talking to this attorney. He became sort of a mentor over that summer. And I said, "So how many trials have you done, like jury trials and closing arguments?" He said, "Closing arguments," and this is after I've been practicing for 30 years in litigation only. Two. He'd done 2 closing arguments in his time. I'm like, that's all I want to do is that. I don't want to do any of the other stuff. All this, the briefing, the writing memos, the motion for this, the arguing with the judge about that, and evidence and travel. And it was just that. And I also saw sort of the lifestyle. It was very tense, very erratic. You have a lot of work, and then you blow off kids' birthdays, you blow off holidays because you got to get ready for this trial. And then the trial settles the day before the trial opens or something. And Yeah, you won, but what did you lose? And so, and also, what got me to that point, I think what gets a lot of people to the point of getting into law school is you have to be somewhat, I would say, type A or maybe competitive to get there. You have to have that kind of person, and so you go with the high school. The more competitive people tend to make it into better colleges, into the better programs in colleges, and the more competitive people there tend to make it into the law schools, and they do that. So you're dealing with like hyper competitive people in a hyper competitive environment, and then you go on to be a litigator. Well, you're literally a gladiator. You're fighting people all the time, and I realized that in myself, I was pretty competitive, and that being a litigator, it's not just a lot of people think, oh, you're trying to win the case. No, the case is hundreds of little battles. This motion, that statement, this statement, the judge awarding this, the judge denying that. Every little thing is a competition. And so it's a muscle that you would train. And I realized that if I were in that world and living in that space, I would be feeding the competitive side of myself all the time. And I was concerned that I would not be able to turn that switch off and become a good dad, a good husband, and I'd be able to just not be that way all the time, because it does. A lot of people say, or I like to say this: I'm not a lawyer. I'm not who I am because I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer because of who I am.
Mhm.
And so I was worried that I wouldn't be able to separate that because it is a big part of your life. And so I think there's an old, people use it a lot of different ways of this now, but there's an old story that I remember. It was a Native American saying of that inside of all of us, there are two wolves. There's a good wolf and a bad wolf, or a fear wolf and a courage wolf, however you want to say it. And the one that inside you that wins is the one that you feed. And I thought, well, if I'm in that competitive world and I'm living that, I might be successful outwardly. I might have a good career as a lawyer, but I think inwardly and personally, I might not be because I'd be feeding that part of myself. And which is really weird because I'm not this super, especially back then in my early 20s, I was not this super philosophical, introspective kid, but I had this moment of epiphany that said, this path is going to lead you to this direction. And I may have been wrong, but it's the way I kind of projected into it. And so I just 180. I went and said, I don't want to be a litigator after all this. And here I'm at a litigation factory law school and I'm on mock trial. And I said, I want to be a transactional attorney. So I really started shifting over and started taking a bunch of classes. And when I finally could, my second year and my third year of law school, I could take more electives. And I took every business class I could, particularly international business, which is what was my passion at the time. I still enjoy it. It's really hard to think about in our technological world, business not being international. I mean, you're on a web, you're international immediately. So I said, okay, let me switch over to that. And that's one of the reasons I ended up going on and getting a Master of Laws from University of Houston in international business law, is because I was coming out of this school that was kind of known for training litigators. I didn't want to be a litigator. And I said, well, I need to kind of get some more credibility or credentials on the business side. And I didn't have a job coming out because all the interviews I had were with litigation factories, or litigation firms. And so I went and got a master's degree in international business law. So I took a fourth year of law school. So I guess, yeah, somebody. So when I go in, I go all in.
Absolutely. And I've recognized a lot of lawyers have told me they had this like great enlightenment when they were in law school or when they were in undergrad that really shaped them as a person as a whole. And going back to the TV and movie aspect, it influences everybody. I remember I watched Legally Blonde for the first time and I was like, law school's about to be amazing. I'm gonna like sleep one day, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna get into Harvard Law. And as I interview more people, as I do more research, as I do summer courses, I realize that's not the case. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's the perspective many people think that law school is going to be a walk in the park, that it's going to be as easy as it is in the movies. And that's certainly not true. And that's another reason why I created my podcast to give realistic and true goals and interpretations of the law. And additionally, how you said that mock trial, that's something that's prevalent in high school today. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
good extracurricular that I'm glad you mentioned that high schoolers can take now. And additionally, how you had the options to switch and how you really realized that the competitive side can't be something that can take over you. And to relate it again, whenever I'm in speech and debate, and I come back from a debate, or I'm talking to my friends and we have like a slight disagreement, or my parents whenever they take my phone or something, and I just go crazy. I have to really think about and remember, hey, this is not the setting to do that. So I'm glad you mentioned all the ways that the law or your personality can relate to what you do and your career in the future, which I think is a great story and experience that is valuable to everyone. Okay, going to how you were interested in international law, how you international business law, I'm sorry. You later pursued an LLM in international business law at the University of Houston Law Center.
Hmm.
What I know you mentioned what motivated you, but can you elaborate and continue what motivated you on your legal education with that degree?
Yeah, I mean, it was LLMs are not required in most cases, and in law school you just get a law degree, and I think more and more law schools have started allowing for kind of certification programs or some kind of a credential that says, oh, this person has a transactional specialty or whatever. But law school is just a general doctor of jurisprudence. It's law school, and so for me, it was about I really wanted to do work in international business, and there, being Houston, and I wanted to stay in Texas, so it's Houston, Dallas, Austin, maybe. There are I wanted to do international business. There aren't a lot of firms that do it. There are some more than say in Sulphur Springs, but there are not a lot that do it, and so it's competitive. So I thought I needed it to stand out. I just graduated, and I think part of it is, had I known all along I wanted to do international business and transactional, I probably would have gone to a different law school and would have started pursuing different interests first year, second year. But because it was after my second year when I really kind of shifted, and I was already kind of pretty far down this path, a lot of big law firms, they hire out of the people they've had after this, the second year associate gig. That's when you get your offer. Well, so I already missed that boat because I wasn't going to be a litigator, and I didn't want to do that. So, and there was also the year I graduated, even though law was overall pretty steady, there was a little bit of a hiccup in the economy, and it was, there was like just not a great hiring year. And so, I thought, well, let me see what I can do to say, no, this person could do business law. He has some special credential, some extra class work or whatever. And so an LLM was it was like a master's. Well, it's a master's you get from a law school, right? And it was from the reason I went from University of Houston was the fact that they had the program that was specifically for international business law. It was state law tuition, not private school, so that was cheaper. I was already in Houston, and the dean of the law school, Stephen Zamora, who before he had been the dean, he had been on these NAFTA panels, and so NAFTA was still a very big thing there. So I thought U of H, being close to the border on the coast, having that sort of an international city, and then University of Houston having the dean be somebody who was very involved in international things, and they had a summer in Mexico program that I had planned to go to the summer. I was starting the fall and the spring, and I was going to finish the courses in the summer. And so I thought this was a great little opportunity for me. But I'll be honest, it bought me another year to try to find a job too. So because every other application I had made, and this was job finding back then was a little tougher. Well, it's always tough, right? But I mean, as far as the tools you have, we had the internet, but it was not like the internet we have now. It was very difficult. A lot of firms were not online, especially if they were smaller. There were ways to do some research, but how I contacted most people was you wrote a letter. So if you were not, if you wanted to work for a really big law firm and you were a top 25 or 50 law school, you just need to be in the top quarter or whatever, and they would come to you on campus interviews. But if you didn't want to work for a big law firm, or if you weren't in the top 10%, or if you didn't go to a top 50 law school, good luck, get a job. And so, career services office, they did what they could, but they weren't really built for that. They were built for the bigger firm thing. And I didn't really want to do big law. I wanted more entrepreneurial type work. I didn't want to be one of 10,000 lawyers at a firm. I just felt like that's a glorified employee, and I wanted to have a little more influence in that. And so, so that's sort of why I ended up choosing the path that I did. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it worked for me. And it did give me an extra year to try to find an opportunity. An email did work back then, although it was hard to find an email address for people. But I did, and that's how the LLM got me my very first job, and it was in the field that I wanted to go into, which was international business, technically international trade law. And so it was. So I guess, like I said, it worked. It's not required, and it's not right for everyone. It is another year of your life. It is more tuition, but for me, it worked, and that's kind of something that a lot of lawyers don't have is an LLM. So I always feel a little extra special. I'm really, most people don't care, but deep down, I'm like, well, I have more letters after my name than you do.
Oh, wonderful. So like you said, a ton of students or college students struggle finding a job, and it's good that professionals also struggle too, and it's good to buy yourself some time and do what you really like to pursue a career. And like you said, many people do switch majors or switch career paths in the middle. So it's great to see that you have options again. And like you said, I don't think there was LinkedIn back then where you could
No.
just keep scrolling, be like, oh, I want to connect. No, so it's great that you had you had to send letters and you had to outreach that way. In my opinion, I feel like it's more gratifying to send a letter and get a reply than to get a notification. So I'm glad that you had that then. And so this just shows that everybody struggles and that in the end, everything will fall in place. Um, Moving on to our next section, which is teaching and professional work. Many legal professionals dedicate a part of their degree to teaching and mentoring the next generation. This role allows them to share both their practical knowledge and personal experience. And your career has included many years in the classroom, so helping students. So let's talk about your experience as an educator. You've taught law for many years, including 2 decades at Baylor Law School before joining the Cox School of Business. What inspired you to start teaching?
That was that's a fun story. It was not intentional. If you had told me sitting in law school or sitting, where you are today, that I was going to be a teacher anywhere at any level, I would have laughed at you. I had no intention of being a teacher. Nothing against teachers. I respected them, but I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to do law. Teachers was teacher, were they were for teaching. And so it just wasn't something I ever even thought about, other than briefly when I was, sophomore in college, when I was taking those economics classes, maybe I'll be an economics professor or something like that. But that was a very short-lived idea. Once I got back on the law train, I would be a lawyer, and it wasn't something that I pursued. Well, I was about a fourth year attorney, and the partner was a named partner at the firm I would work for, my first job out of law school, had gotten contacted by Baylor Law School. They wanted to teach an international trade law class. We were a boutique law firm that did international trade law, and we were in Dallas, but Waco's not that far away, and there's not a lot of international trade in Waco. So they're like, you either go to Austin, somebody from Austin, or somebody from Dallas that could drive in. And so this is way before online classes were really much of a thing. And law schools still frown on online classes, by the way. So they contacted her, and of course she's running a law firm. She's named partner, all this kind of stuff. She didn't want to do it, but she emailed it over to me and said, are you interested? And I'm like, interesting. That's kind of cool. I said, you know what could it hurt? And I said, so I reached out and said, hey, Adrian's not interested, but I might be. And would you be interested in? Or how desperate are you? I didn't say that, but like, how desperate are you? And they wrote back like, yeah, sure, send us your resume, and we'll let you know. So I said, fine. I sent my resume, thinking nothing's gonna come from it. And they reached back out and said, okay, great, we'll start this summer. Like, oh, okay. They called my bluff, I guess. And so I said, okay. So they gave me. I said, well, so what book do we use? I figured that I was taking over something. They could just hand me something. I would just teach it. And they said, oh, we don't. We never taught this before. So here's the course description. It was like 3 sentences. And by the way, the course description I didn't think really was very appropriate for an international trade law class. It was much more treaty oriented, and I'm like, no, trade law is like where businesses interact with this, and customs and export. And so they were fine with me even changing that. And so I went down there, and it was once a week for the summer quarter. So there were like 9 or 10 sessions. So I drove down to Waco. And the good news is, because the partner forwarded it to me, that was her giving me permission to take the job, which is, it takes time out of your day to teach. And so they schedule it, they're very kind. They schedule it in the afternoon. So I would leave around, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon and drive down. The class started at 4:30 or 6 or something like that. And it would go till about 7. It was like 3 hours once a week. So it wasn't that much out of my day. And so I went down there, taught it, and it was funny. The very first class I had, I think it was the first time they had offered it, and it was of the summer, which a lot of people do their summer internships and summer associate gigs in the summer. So it's more like summer school in college, right? There's not a lot of people there. So they gave me this big classroom, normal sized law school classroom, and there were 4 people in the class, 4. And so I thought, I can't do this. So we ended up going to a library conference room. I just took a conference room. So we just kind of sat around the table and I taught the class. It was fun. I had kind of built something. There was a textbook I used. I didn't really like it. So ultimately I wrote my own textbook. I just kind of pulled it together from things that I used in my class, kind of created a text, International Trade Law, Chester's Guide to International Trade Law. And because I built it the way I thought, if you were going to go and say you knew international trade law after you graduated from Baylor Law, you should be able to do these things. You should know these concepts. And so that's how I built it. But it always was weird because I taught those students, those law school students, as if they were my business clients at my firm. So I was more of a business attorney even then, teaching law school students. And they really, I got a lot out of it. It was, there were 2 big surprises that came out of it. One was how I really enjoyed it. I thought it'd be, the reason I took it, I'll be honest with you, it was very selfish. I thought it'd be cool. I thought it would look good on my resume. I thought it'd be funny that a law school that probably wouldn't have admitted me and I'm teaching at, because Baylor has really high, LSAT standards. My LSAT was good, but it wasn't at their level. They were at there with UT and I wasn't at that level for application at that time. There's a whole story I get into about why I probably should have studied for the LSAT, but that would have come in handy too, or taken out an LSAT prep course or anything. But this is just me kind of, figuring it out as I go and making mistakes. But so it was very selfish, and I thought when I get down there, I'll do it once. They'll probably find somebody better by next semester, by next year. So I'll do it one time, but it'll be on my resume. Hey, taught at a top 50 law school. That's credentials. When you're a young attorney, young professional, anything that makes you stand out, that shows, oh, I've been blessed by Baylor Law. I've been blessed by the LLM degree. Anything that kind of makes you special helps you stand out, helps you gain credibility. And law is all about credibility. And so especially early in your career when you don't have 20 years experience. So I saw that as in a way, very selfish, but I was also kind of curious. What would it be like to teach at a law school? It seemed like a fun adventure. And so I did it, figure one and done. Well, the biggest surprise was I loved it. I loved the mentoring. I think it made me a better lawyer because they asked me questions, started challenging me. So I had to go look up things that I hadn't had to do for 4 or 5 years because I was getting to that point in my career where I thought I knew this stuff. And they were challenging things that I just kind of took for granted because that's the way I learned it. Because as a lawyer, unfortunately, a lot of times you only learn stuff you're paid to learn. You don't necessarily learn all the nuances unless there's a case that comes up that requires you to go down that rabbit hole. Well, students make you go down that rabbit hole all the time with the questions they ask. And it's because, and there is this, saying, if you really want to know something, teach it. And then you find out how much you know. And I found out I didn't know as much as I thought I did because there were areas that weren't in my wheelhouse that I had to go get, kind of bone up on. That was great, and I really enjoyed the mentoring aspect of interacting with the students, and so that was something sparked in that one semester, that one summer. And the other thing that really surprised me was they asked me back. Like they asked me back, and they kept asking me back. Like, oh, okay, I guess you don't want to look for somebody else, So all right, I really thought this was a one-time deal, that was just a stopgap until they went in there. So I ended up teaching there. About 4 or 5 years later, after teaching it in the summer, they had somebody that was teaching international business transactions class retire or whatever, and they said, "Hey Jim, would you mind taking on this class too?" A different semester. So I was teaching the summer quarter, and then I would teach in the winter quarter the international business transactions. So I had to build another class. It was more akin to the kind of stuff I was wanting to do, though. The import-export class was really more regulatory, customs law, export law, which I did a lot of. But by the time I took over the other class, I'd already started my own firm, and I was doing more business transactional work. And the international business transactions class was just contracts 3. right? It was the advanced contract and transactional work, which was more fun for me, and so I ended up doing that. But all in, as you mentioned, I taught for 20 years as an adjunct at Baylor, and that whole time I was a lawyer who taught a class, and I still define myself at that whole time for 20 years as just a lawyer who taught a class, because and a lot of attorneys do teach a class here or there as an adjunct, and I think I would highly encourage anyone with any interest to do that, because first of all, it's fun. You get bored with the stuff you've been doing. You're a professional, but to reach out and talk to young people who are just now starting out, and just kind of their energy and interest and intellect, it's really fun to do. It does challenge you as an attorney to make you fill those gaps in of the practice areas where on kind of the periphery of what you do, that are part of the area of practice, but you haven't really dealt with it, so you've got to bone up on it, so it makes you better. But also, I think as a practicing attorney, the students really responded to me because I wasn't a full time professor. I was a real lawyer, and the first day of class, I'd always say, "Hey, I'm not a real professor, but I'm a real lawyer." And that they liked that. They liked having those outsiders. So it's great for schools to be able to bring in a certain number of adjuncts to teach particularly specialized coursework. And it's great for students to be able to get that perspective as opposed to full-time law professors that just kind of do a lot of scholarly research, to have real practitioners come in. And my students also took advantage of that, not just ask me questions about the real world, this is how we do it, but they would also set aside meetings just to talk about law careers. They're like, because you're a real lawyer, how do I get a job? How do I, discern which job to take and stuff? And so that was the thing that, coming back to that first thing that surprised me, was that what I really love most about teaching, the teaching part's okay. It's fun standing in front of people, having them all rely on every word you say, and having that sort of authority. It gives me that little courtroom thing I didn't get when I decided not to be a litigator. I get that sort of command of the room, but it's actually the one-on-one mentoring with the students and helping them either figure out something that's difficult, or maybe talking to them about a legal career. I usually, even at SMU now, which I teach in the business school, I have maybe a couple of students every semester that are interested in law school. And even though there's a nice pre-law program and everything else, much like yourself, they're smart enough to go beyond that and ask other people different questions to discern things. And I do my best to try to do that. I don't get a commission if you go to law school. I don't necessarily steer everyone to law school. What I do try to help is okay, what kind of stuff do you want to do? Why do you want to go to law school? And in other words, the discernment that I probably should have done a better job of. I try to help them do before they get there, and give them some of the stuff that you don't read on the brochure, that you don't get from the law school, websites, the admission sites, or the U.S. News and World Report rankings. The sort of behind the scenes, the things you really need to think about when you're choosing a law school.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for giving your experiences as a teacher. I know I've met so many different teachers who are varied in sharing their views and experiences, and I'm grateful we have people like you in the space who are so willing to share information. And going back on teaching and all that sort of stuff, it just proves that there are opportunities everywhere. Because I'm sure you agreed that this teaching opportunity was not expected in your career. And it was just a little, I think, summer activity that you thought was fun that transformed into something much bigger and is now a part of your lifestyle and career. And so that's amazing to hear. And additionally, how you said that teaching really opens your eyes to the mistakes that you make or the mistakes that are out there in the world. I know I sometimes teach speech and debate, or I teach at my dance studio. Whenever I'm critiquing or if I'm sharing information, it makes me reflect, am I doing that? Is something that I take in every day. So it's great to see that teaching can offer so many different perspectives again, and so many different ways for you to improve yourself. And that's generally what I got from this question. So that's great to hear. And one more question, in your courses like business law or entrepreneurial legal strategies, what are the most important lessons that you hope students take away?
I think they're different classes, and again, these classes are not at a law school, so they're at a business school. So I'm teaching business students particularly the business law class. It's the required class that, if you graduate from SMU with a BBA from the Cox School, you have to take a business law class. You don't have to take me, but there's only three of us. So, you gotta, I teach about half the classes. So there's a good chance you might be taking me, or there's a couple of other really good professors. And we all kind of approach it our own way, our own different style. But for me, because my law career, I work with business owners and I've worked with so many entrepreneurs that I try to build the class as if I put myself in the shoes of the people in the classroom. Okay, these business law students, they're going to go work at a big corporation. They're going to work for their family's business. They're going to start a business. They're going to work for a hedge fund or in finance or whatever. What does, it's kind of thing. What do they all need to know? They all need to know something different. Well, what do they combine? What's the most important stuff to come out with it? And so I build the program from the student perspective. I think, what do I think they need to know going into the world? Not to be a lawyer, not to go to law school. That's not the goal. It's for this role in their business life. What tools do they need? And then so I built the program around that. So I focus on that. So the entire course is built from a business law class from that perspective. And the same thing with the entrepreneurial law class. It's for students. I'm assuming, okay, these guys are going to be opening their own business. They're going to, whether it's a side hustle or they go right out of law school, or maybe 5 years from now, or sorry, out of business school, or 5 years from now in their career, they start their own business or start their own consulting firm or something. And so maybe they'll remember some of this, retain this. So I build it from that. And I use a lot of the same information as if I'm talking to my clients. But now I get the client for, a whole semester, and I get to teach them stuff instead of just doing it for them. And so the main thing I try to teach them in both situations, both, I guess, the combination of entrepreneurial law class as well as the BL survey class, is that law shouldn't be something that you are scared of. That law is a sword and it's a shield. And probably better told, it's a suit of armor. And so, if you don't want to do anything, you don't want to take any risks, you don't want to ever be sued, you don't want to ever make mistakes, well, stay in your cave, stay in your castle. Nothing ever is going to happen to you there. You stay there, you hope, or very little can happen to you. But, if there's a dragon outside the castle and you go out there, you need to suit up. And that dragon could be that business you want to tack on, that business opportunity, or that you want to start, or that merger, or that whatever that role, that person that's infringing your patent, or whatever it is. That's the dragon you've got to slay. Well, you need good, solid armor. You need the shield. You need a sword. And that is what the law can be. And I try to teach them how you can put this on and go out there. And now you don't have to stay in your castle. You could fight the dragon. You could defeat the dragon. And then you can keep moving forward. Now, but only if you know what you're doing. And so the focus for me in those classes is really practical application, practical problem solving, giving them a working knowledge of the concepts, not so that they can be their own lawyer. And I always say this: you're not a lawyer. This is just a touch of this stuff. But it helps them work better with lawyers. It helps them appreciate the gravity of the decision making that lawyers have to make. Because a lot of people in the business world, even when they have in-house lawyers, they don't like dealing with them because they're like, oh, all they do is say no. Well, this is why we say no. We say no because you're going to get eaten by the dragon if you don't put the freaking helmet on, right? You don't do these other things. You cause a lot of problems. And a lot of these students will go on and get a job. Well, they're employees. Everything they do could create liability for their employer. I don't think a lot of them quite realize that right off. And once you appreciate that, you just have a different perspective on maybe why they're not letting you do some of the things you want to do. It's not because you're stupid. It's not because they don't trust you. It's because there's more risk than you appreciate. And that's really what it's all about. Business law, and that's, as a transactional attorney, business lawyer, that's my focus. It's all about risk. Identifying risk so that you can address it. You can't always eliminate it, but you can sometimes chop it up, share it among people so you don't have as much yourself. Or you can put your helmet on and now you can go fight the dragon because you're protected. And so that's what I try to teach them, that law is, it's not, first of all, I tell them, you're not going to be a lawyer. You're going to have some concepts. You're going to understand a little bit of basics and how this whole thing works. But law is not something to be scared of. Law is a shield. It can protect you. Law is also a sword. It can defend you and can go after bad guys. And so, but you need to know how to work with legal counsel. And this will better prepare you with with the tools you need, with basic understanding of principles and concepts like contracts or torts, even constitutional law, which we all, and I always start with the foundation.
Mm.
Constitution, government, it all starts there because every bit of law is the higher sources of law, and then everything filters down from that, and then we get into administrative law, and then we get into specific stuff like torts and contracts and employment law, and intellectual property, and so I think they get a well-rounded appreciation of the role law plays in business. And they feel if they walk out of my class with a few little pointers, a few little good stories, and a better, maybe just less intimidation from the concept of law, and maybe just a more appreciation of the role that lawyers have. So they don't necessarily love us or hate us, but they get we're, if anything, a necessary evil to protect the other evils that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the law and being a lawyer is very powerful. You stated before how you're either the bad guy or the good guy. And that sort of decision, that sort of change, that sort of role plays a very heavy part not only on your like mental capacity, on everyone's image as you as well. And really learning the changes, the aspects of that is complicated and also involves risks and challenges where I can also relate. I don't like stepping out of my comfort zone as much or taking that extra math class. I relate as well to saying that I don't really like change and to really hone in on that and go out of your comfort zone and take risk is a great thing unlike staying in your castle like you said and not really stepping out and facing the world as you should. And so that's a great aspect that I took from again this question that could really apply to I feel everyone who's a student or an upcoming college student or even a graduate, I should say.
Yeah, well, and the more you take chances,
Mm.
educated guesses, educated
Yeah.
risks. Don't just jump blindly into things. That's don't. I don't want you to take that from this. But I mean, you do all the prep you can do, and but at some point you do have to take a leap of faith. The more you do that, the more comfortable you get doing that, and the more you do that and fail and get back up and then you succeed, the more you realize it's not the biggest, scariest thing in the world. Failure. Failure is just a part of the ladder of success. And so you get more comfortable with it. You start to train it like a muscle of fear or pushing that edge of your comfort zone is where you're supposed to be. And it's intimidating the very first time you do it, but the more you do it, you just kind of get used to it. When I growing up in a small town, the tallest building we had in Sulphur Springs was the courthouse, and it was maybe 3 stories tall. I mean, maybe. So then and at ET, I think the library is like 7 stories tall. So I wasn't used to big tall buildings, and so I was a little intimidated by heights, especially structures and buildings and things. So when I moved to Houston, I lived in a high rise. I lived on the 14th floor, and it had a balcony. The very first day I got there, I didn't go anywhere near that balcony. I kept the blinds closed, and I enjoyed the. It was the reason I got there is because I could walk to law school. It was just two blocks away. But by the end of the second week, I'm not only out on the balcony, I'm like sitting on the railing of the balcony, just kind of looking over. You just get used to something that used to terrify you. The more you face it, it's a truth of human nature. And so the best thing you can do if you want to do big things that are really really scary, I say do small things that are somewhat scary today, and then do another one tomorrow, and eventually you're just not scared anymore, or fear just becomes so much a part of what you do that it doesn't stop you from doing things. And you also, every time you conquer a fear, you get a little bit stronger at conquering fear, and so it takes a bigger thing to scare you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Those little tiny wins that we have every single day is something that can overall build our confidence in general. And I agree with that completely. And I'm glad you said that because, again, change and risk is what shapes the world today. It's what shapes law in general. If you don't take that risk, and if you don't start taking risks now, you won't be able to make that change in your future that you so are willing to do. Okay, yeah. Moving on to entrepreneurship. How did you start your law firm and what details entail of that?
Sure. Yes, I was. I had my first job out of law school. I taught the class, at Baylor, and the industry I was in, which was international trade, so customs and enforcement stuff, took a real turn south in the early 2000s because after 9/11. So basically, what international trade law is, when you represent clients, you're basically representing clients fighting with the government because the government's customs and stuff. They're trying to say the client's not paying enough duties or it's on the export side. So, from a business standpoint, what you want as an attorney is an angry government that's going after clients a lot, right? So it keeps you
Yeah.
busy. Well, after 9/11, the government and business and industry really needed each other, so they weren't being mean anymore, which dried up a lot of work for the industry, which is one of the risks of a boutique law practice. Because if that area gets, is an industry that's on a downturn, it's a downturn. Well, basically, I was at a small boutique. I was not a partner in the firm. I'd been there 4 or 5 years. I was very productive for them. But when the work dries up, you start looking around at, okay, what can we cut? And I was the most expensive thing the firm had because what they paid me. I also made them the most money. I made them, 3 times what I billed. But they thought, well, we don't have enough work. We get rid of him. We don't pay him, but we can do the work. And so basically, I was downsized from my very first law job. So after 4 years or whatever practice, I just gotten married, and I starting a family, and I'm literally months earlier. But the firm had been kind of limping along, and I knew it was struggling, and eventually they just said, "Hey, we're going to have to let you go." And so here I was, 4 or 5 years out of law school, a wife, family to support. She still had a house that she hadn't sold. I had a house that hadn't sold. We had 2 houses, 2 cars. She had just finished her MBA, so she wasn't working yet. She was looking for a job. The economy was, a little shaky. This was after nine. Again, it wasn't 9/11. It was kind of the trickle effect over the next 2002. I got married in late 2002. Early 2003 is when I was downsized. So about a year after 9/11, maybe 15 months. And the economy overall was fine. It's just that industry was struggling. And so I remember reaching out, kind of panicking. We did have better internet at this point. It had been in 2000s, and so I was able to look around, and I had some connections in the network. And my natural reflection was, especially now that I had a family and all these obligations, I need to get a job. I just need to go. Even though my goal, and matter of fact, even in my 4th year, I started taking classes through the Bar Association on starting and running your own law practice. So I knew I wanted to, whether I was going to be a partner at that firm and help run that or on my own. It was always something I wanted to do, but I was looking for a job because I had these commitments. Well, I remember my wife, my new wife, came to me, and the greatest thing she ever did for me, other than make my children, was, and I guess say yes, was say, "Why are you looking for another job? Don't you want to start your own firm? Just do that." Like it was just like so obvious. It's such an easy thing. I'm like, "Oh, really? Yeah, just start that. Yeah, push all our cards, our money to the middle, and go. Let's go for it." But when she did that, much like when that named partner kind of sent over that notice from Baylor, like, do this, it was like her giving me permission to do something I really wanted to do, but I would have felt guilty, putting that risk, my family at risk. It's one thing to take my risk. Another thing when you've got family and other folks to support that are counting on you. And so, but when she gave me that permission, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. Let's do this. And so I called on all my skill sets, my business background that limited business background that I had from my just different things I'd done, what I'd learned at that firm as far as not only being a lawyer, but also the good thing about being in a small firm is you do have more transparency and insight into the way the business operates as opposed to the large firm where everything's just kind of built like this massive machine and you have these C-level people, these professional business people that are running it, whereas at a small firm it's lawyers trying to be business people. And I saw, and some things they did really well, but a lot of businessy things, like a lot of lawyers, really poorly. And so you learn from that as well. Just like parenting, you learn what your parents did really well, and you're like, I'm going to do that. And then things they didn't do as well, I'm going to do better. I learned from a lot of the things they didn't do well, and so I did a lot. That doesn't mean I didn't make a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes with money, with putting money into this, putting money into that, buying things, licensing software that was way bigger than what I needed. So it was a process. Made mistakes. But I tried to approach opening a law firm the way I would recommend telling somebody who to start a business. Do a business plan. Just like you're starting I don't know, a lemonade stand or a future Fortune 500 company or a tech company. Do a business plan. And that's what I did. To the best of my knowledge, I did. I did research on that. I read. I signed up for blogs and things like that about running businesses, not just law businesses, but businesses, particularly service-based businesses. Because law, yes, it's a different kind of business than everything else, but at the same time, it's still a business. You still need the same stuff other businesses have, but there's a little wrinkle to it. So you do need that access to expertise that is specific to the law industry, but 95% of what we need is just business stuff. So I focused on learning as much. I read all the business books I could. Not just about how to start and run a business, but things like Good to Great and Selling the Invisible and things. So approach running a business like it's a new career you're getting into. And so you already know how to be a lawyer. So I knew I could do that. I knew I could practice law, but the business part I needed to get better at. And so thankfully I had the little economics background. I'd had some entrepreneurship opportunities already. And I had already had my first minor failure in business. And so I knew how to do, a little bit more business. It was this thing called the Go Brush. It was a product that I had developed and was trying to market and sell as I was starting my law career. It was just kind of this little side project. I call it a failure. It wasn't. I made my money back. I didn't lose money, but it just didn't go anywhere. So in that sense, it was a failure. I'm not on the cover of Fortune magazine, but that was a great experience because it taught me a little bit more about business. And you can read a lot about it. You can get mentorship. You can take classes in it, but there is no substitute for just doing it because there's so much more to it. And you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to fail and forgive yourself for failing because some lessons you have to just learn. You can't make decisions today unless you've made bad decisions before because that's what it took to become who you are today. And that's how you learn, I need to make these better decisions. And so I did, and I enjoyed it. But I will say this about earning your own business. Once you've been an entrepreneur in any capacity and had any success whatsoever, and I just mean you were able to pay your mortgage, you kept your lights on. You don't have to be on the cover of a magazine. You just any level of success, you are ruined forever as an employee. I'm just saying. I've tried to go back to. I merged with a larger firm and thought, hey, I'll do that. I'm tired of doing all this other stuff. I'll just be a lawyer again. It was very oppressive, and it was a great firm. It felt oppressive to me because it was all this bureaucracy. I had to ask permission for things. I had people second guessing things that I do, and I'm like, you don't know what you're doing. You're a lawyer. You've never done this. I've done this. And they thought they knew because every lawyer's smart and we think we know everything, but we don't generally know business. And that was the most important thing about what I realized is I knew what I didn't know and I was just going to figure it out, or I was going to talk to somebody who did know, or I was going to learn about it. Whereas, and doctors are the same way, by the way, doctors and lawyers are the worst business people, worst investors, because we are so smart and we make a lot of money doing the thing that we do that we think we can do everything great. And you can if you're willing to work at it the way you worked at law, but you don't. They don't do that. They just expect that they're a good lawyer, therefore they run good at running a law firm. Not true. You need to learn the skills or find the right people, not just people, but the right people who can do those things. If you don't want to do marketing, find a marketing company. If you want to do web design, find a web design company. The challenge is finding a good one. Finding one that gets what you're doing and understands how to do it for you. There's an art to that as well. And putting together that sort of bench of all those different tools you have, accounting, law firm management software and stuff like that. And there's different tools out there. Which one's the right one? You have to sometimes kiss a bunch of frogs before you get the prince, right? And so there is a little bit to that. And so I went through that whole process. And what's great, because then it really drove me more toward working with startups and business owners, because I felt like I was one of them. I got what they were dealing with. I got when I started hiring associates and staff, I got what it meant to make payroll and to put everybody else first and to worry about them like they're your family, and still have to bill time like a lawyer, but also go get clients and run the business. It's a lot. It is a lot, but it is also very, very rewarding because I love that I could do it. It was mine. I could build it. I could be creative in that way. And I think there's a lot of lawyers. People think we're all just sort of, black and white letters, words, whatever. But a lot of lawyers are some of the most creative people I know. Matter of fact, even in law school, I knew people. They were artists. They were musicians. They had all these great skills. And I was always so amazed at all this talent these people had. And yet they're in law. They're not pursuing music. They're not pursuing this. It was just something that was a part of them. And so there is a creative, and we all as humans probably need that creative outlet. And for me, my creative outlet is business. And by after I had some success and some failure along that, I became a better mentor because I could actually help guide people maybe to learn from my mistakes so they don't have to make the same ones that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to touch on each of your points here. The economy is one of the most unpredictable things ever. So I'm glad you re said your experience on how whenever it slowly went down, how you lost your job, because that's a reality for many students, many people, and it's not the end of the world. I know, especially now in a time of turmoil, a lot of people are losing their jobs, and it's great to see living professionals who are successful who have also lost their job. So that's a great thing to hear to kind of motivate and suppress the discomfort or disappointment some people have. And additionally, through your law firm, it's you realize how much education plays into it. You have a variety of degrees and skill sets from your undergraduate all the way to your LLM, your law degrees. So it's awesome to see that you used all your skills to really develop your law firm in general. And through that, I realized like you when you develop your own law firm, you like being your own boss. And so whenever change again happens, whenever you combine, it's hard and it takes some time to change through. And overall, I hear that you need to really be able to hone your skills and to really be able to learn. Like if you don't know something, go out and learn about it. And these are all life lessons that I need to hear and that all these students out here really could hear and learn. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Yeah, lifelong learning is, if you like to learn stuff, law is definitely a good place because you need to learn. The law is always changing. There's always new things coming in, and not just substantive areas. I mean, AI, for example, is forcing lawyers to change the way we practice law because we have a mandate to adapt to new technology as a law. It's an ethical obligation. We're supposed to use the newest technology safely. And how do you use AI safely? How do you implement it? What is it going to do? I mean, so even if you're in an area of practice like family law or wills and trusts that don't change a lot year to year as far as the new substantive law doesn't change, the law industry changes and it forces you to adapt and you need to learn about it. So law is a business of lifelong learning, not to mention the fact that we have a legal requirement every year to do 15 hours of continuing education. In addition to that, you need to learn about business, you need to learn about marketing, learn about client development, and then there's just general learning. So it's just part of life. I mean, technology is constantly evolving and moving. So, and if you are if you the minute you start to think you've got it all figured out is when you stop growing, you stop becoming. And so as long as my brain's still working, I'm going to be trying to learn stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And learning, it take from elementary to middle school to high school to college, learning takes you through everything. And if you don't have any, if you don't have any like continuation of the world, if you don't know what's going on, the best you can do is learn about it. And learning will always be that sort of bench you can fall on. Going on to community service and working in the government, you also served on the Health City Council and the board of your city's economic development corporation. So, what motivated you to get into the local government?
Yeah, it kind of goes along with the this whatever I guess ends up with the law thing, right? One of I think some people that are drawn to law, there's when they're a kid, maybe they see a lawyer commanding a room in a courtroom or something. People all looking at them for leadership, all looking at them for guidance, and not because they're just super awesome rock stars, but because they are educated. They know how this thing works. They have special knowledge because of the law of how they have that ability, they have power. And I think with the old like the old Spider-Man thing, with power, with great power comes great responsibility. It's true, and I do think that while I don't like being forced to do anything, I think ethically and morally, when you have the ability to do things, you have to answer for all these gifts you've been given, what you did with them. And if all I did was put food on my table, that's it, and that's fine. If that's all I could do, then that's fine. But what if I have extra, if I could do other things and I didn't, then I think I have a lot of I'm not, I'm the disappointment as a person, as a human. And so I think a lot of professionals, not just lawyers, but lawyers in particular, but I think a lot of professionals sort of feel that. I try to put that onto my business law students. I mean, there many of them are going in. None of them are going to be lawyers, or very few will. They're going to go into professions. They're going to be educated professionals with resources and training, and they're going to have the ability to influence their communities, hopefully for the better. And they may choose to do it. They may choose not to. If you all you do is try to enrich yourself, then that's a very selfish way of looking at life. I think it's a very empty way of looking at life. While you still need to take care of yourself and your family, if to the extent you can, there I think you just call to some level of service, and it was always just kind of there. I think part of it is sort of chicken egg because when people find out you're a lawyer, they're like, oh, we need you on this, so you get a lot of volunteered for things, voluntold. It started. I moved to the Lakewood area of Dallas, and our realtor who we were working with was on the neighborhood association board and convinced me to come join the board. Next thing you know, I'm the president, just like that. It happens. You get involved in charities, you're on the board. And so the idea that I would be involved in the community wasn't something I specifically set out to do. It just kind of seemed like what you do. It just kind of seemed like I should. And as those opportunities arose, if anything, I had to choose what not to do because it could be overwhelming, and that can be. I mean, as a lawyer, you have so many things, so many needs that are out there, whether it's a charity or community service or your HOA or whatever. And for me, I always looked at. By the time I got, particularly when I moved out to Heath, my kids, I had 4 children. 3 were very young, and I thought, okay, I'm in this community. My kids are in this community. I need to be involved not only with making my kids happy and healthy and fed and everything else, but to make sure the community that they're in is better, it's safe, it's improving. And so that's what led to what started with just being in the HOA, and then I became the president of the homeowners association, and then I said, well, maybe I can get involved in local community politics or whatever, helping people that I think are doing the right thing get elected. So we would have just informal policies there, like a meet and greet at our house when there was an election to get people to come vote for folks. And then that led to the park board because I like parks. Who doesn't like parks and trails? And so I was served on that. And then through the relationships I had, meeting the various members of the city council and getting the local government officials, kind of just getting to know them. You realize how many challenges that there are in any community, and ours was no different. We're a growing community which has its own challenges, and so at some point there's an opening, and you have enough eyes on you going, it's about time you need to step in and do that. And so I resisted as long as I could, but I had a friend that was on the city council there for the city of Heath, and he was going to run for a different office, but he wanted to make sure that his seat, somebody that he trusted, would be running for it. And so I was sort of recruited for that position to run. And I really didn't want to. I mean, I wanted to be in service, but I didn't want to be on the city council at that moment. My kids were all very involved in middle school sports, high school sports. I was focused on my career and everything, and I wanted to be involved. I wanted to help out. And at the time, I was also on the Economic Development Committee or Council. And Economic Development Corporation is the name of it. It's a committee, but it's a corporation technically. And so I thought that was enough engagement officially. I could just do other stuff to help out. And I was also still president of the HOA. And then I've got my kids going through sports. And so it's just too much. But when service calls you, you sometimes just have to answer. And I'm not exactly sure who said it. I've heard it, multiple times, multiple different ways. But anybody the only people who deserve power are people who don't want it. And who really are worthy of it, and so I thought, okay, well, I really don't want it, so I must be worthy of it. And it was an eye-opening experience because the city council is a wild thing. I served right after COVID, so we were still dealing with some of the things that came out of that as far as grants and things. But you're dealing with a budget, millions of dollars, annual budget. We had some crises out here at Heath with water because we don't have our own water plant. We buy it from North Texas, from Rockwall, who buys it from North Texas Municipal Water District. And, there was a plant went down. We had a pump fail. So there were times when we were really running low on water. We had water issues. So water was a huge thing. We're talking about existential type things like, do you have water? And then the same meeting, we might have somebody come in that wants to put a fence that's 1 foot taller than I mean, so you're dealing with the minutia and the major in the same time breath, and you got to be able to kind of juggle that. And it gave me a new appreciation for all elected officials. There's everybody. It's easy to sit back, much like watching a Cowboys game and seeing them lose, seeing like, oh well, I could coach the team better than that, or I would have done this, I would have done that. It's so different when you're the one in the chair. Because as an outsider, you have no idea all the consequences. When I was on the park board, I was amazed. Wow, there's really more to this whole park board thing than just I like parks. And so I was amazed at how broad that influence was and how broad that role was. And then I moved up to the Economic Development Corporation, and I was like, oh my God, the park board does nothing. The EDC, that's where it's all at. I mean, everything. There was just so much stuff about economic development and how it influences, the how the money that comes in and how we can use that to get the right kind of growth and all this stuff. And then I move over to the council, and it was like nothing was like this because I had just this. I mean, and then the decision making, and you see people post online about, oh, well, that was such a stupid decision. These guys don't know what they're talking about, and I'm like, you can, and I never respond because it's just not worth it. But I would just see these posts on Facebook or on next door or whatever, talking about some decision we're making or what we're not doing, and you could tell they had 5% of the information. They just
Yeah.
really didn't know. And so whether it's our president or congressman or our governor or whatever, I realize while we should hold him to account and we should demand excellence and all this kind of stuff, definitely. But at the same time, I'm probably a little more graceful with them, just because I'm like, I guarantee you there's more to it than we can appreciate. And so I'm going to give them a little bit of leeway here and trust that they're doing their research. I mean, I like their decision they're going with, but I'm not going to say they don't know, what the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the quote that you said, with great power comes great responsibility, because throughout all of this, you've had to deal with great responsibility regarding your community, your friends, and everything. And it makes me touch back to community is one of the most important things to ever shape our world from like the beginning of our childhood. Community is what motivates us and shapes us. And to see that you can give back to it is an awesome and such a gratifying thing to do. And it's great that people recognize your excellence throughout your career and what you've done, which is an amazing thing that you can contribute and hold to yourself. And again, and I volunteer, and it encourages all my peers to also stand up and volunteer and take a stand within the community. To wrap up, one of my favorite questions to ask, I've asked all my interviews this, is that what is one piece of advice you would give to your law school self?
To my law school self.
Or your old
Um,
self, yeah.
well, I mean, there was so much. One piece is really difficult to narrow it down. Um, but if I'm in the middle of law school and I could go back, and I would probably, you know what? This is the advice I give to myself at any level. Don't worry so much.
Mm,
Keep working, keep working, be open. Don't judge other people as much. Don't judge yourself so much. Forgive yourself. Give yourself some leeway. Don't be afraid of fear, or excuse me, of failure. But just don't worry so much. It's okay. It's not that big a deal. Whatever you think is so important is not that important. Just keep moving forward. It's the stuff that you're stressing about every day. It's important today, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 months from now, it's not going to seem like such a big deal. So just enjoy it, do your work, have happiness in your heart, but don't be so freaking nervous about everything all the time. It's hard not to be, right? It's our we you know, we get you get to law school because you're an overachiever. You get into law school and you achieve in law school, you're an overachiever, and that sort of um, mindset is, I guess, what does push you, but it's also counterintuitive. It kind of makes you neurotic, and it can be a little toxic. And if anything, to some people in extremes, it can stop you from taking the chances you need to take to be successful. So I would probably tell myself, don't be so worried about it. Take bigger chances. Take more chances.
absolutely. And one thing that's so interesting to hear is that many lawyers say the same thing, that they worry too much in law school, which proves that sometimes you just need to live your life to the fullest and hope the best comes out of it. But
Yep.
thank you so much, Mr. Chester, for joining me today and sharing your experiences and insights. It was a pleasure learning more about your journey and the many different roles you've taken on throughout your career. And thank you for everyone listening to Lawfully Told. I'm your host, Shirani Ranganatha, and I'll see you next time on an episode of Lawfully Told.